Well, that's not really true. On the other hand, I think I was more curious about drugs than anything else. You know, I mean, I've seen cats because I always have a cat or two around, and if something startles a cat, something strange happens, a cat will become curious about it. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I felt about drugs, is that, I regard them as dangerous and potentially lethal, but I had a cat's curiosity about them.
Hey, dickheads! Like a pink laser beam of truth beaming straight from San Diego, California to your brain hole. We have our illusion projector on, and we're ready to kick worm kisser ass. Today, we are covering the Ganymede Takeover, co-written by Philip K. Dick and Ray Nelson, who is most famous for writing the short story 8 a.m. in the Morning, which inspired the movie They Live. So,
most famous?
Well, hold on, David.
Yeah,
I feel like you're overlooking a very interesting part of Ray Nelson's life, and that is the fact that he also invented the propeller beanie.
Okay, that is very interesting. Let's come back.
You need to get a very like well-rounded view of who Ray Nelson was. Okay?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm David Agranoff, your regular co-host. Author of Punk Rock Ghost Story, Goddamn Killing Machines. If you're watching the video, to my left is...
I'm on your right, or I guess it's your left. I'm Anthony Trevino. And down below, in beautiful Jim Jarmusch black and white.
Or above.
Or above.
Depending on as the case may be. Wait, what are we doing? I'm Langhorne J. Tweed.
You are Langhorne J. Tweed. All right, guys. It's been a minute since we recorded, and we have only one tiny little bit of PKD news that we're going to blow through really quick, which is, for some reason, there's this graphic novel called Bystander 27, which is like a superhero new... Bystander 27. And it has been, I guess it's been a big hit as a graphic novel, but every single article or review seems to be comparing it to Philip K. Dick, and Bleeding Cool had a headline, "What if Philip K. Dick wrote superheroes?" And so I kind of put that out there on Facebook the other day, and a couple of our readers, including Tommy Brem, read it, and they all agreed that it is not very Philip K. Dick.
That's interesting, because I also didn't think it sounded very Philip K. Dick, because the Bleeding Cool article doesn't give you any indication of how it's Dick-like outside of saying, ordinary man, extraordinary world. And I'm like, that's every book.
Yeah, right.
That's like saying, this book is a tour de force. What the fuck does that even mean?
So, and I bring this up mostly because there are so many comparisons to Philip K. Dick with it, and I think it's because Bleeding Cool started this ball down the hill, and then everybody else kind of ran with it. And from everything I'm hearing, it's not. So, don't feel like you have to go out and get it. Is what we're saying.
One of us here will read it, and then we'll be the goddamn judge of that.
Judge, jury, and executioner.
I'm gonna take nodded dibs on reading that. So that being said, that's it for Philip K. Dick news. There's not a lot. He still
moving on.
Is not dead, or still is dead.
He's not dead. Wait,
I'm sorry. Counterclock.
That is news.
Yeah, Counterclock World was affecting me. So
what if at the end of all these episodes we do, Larry takes his face off, and he's been PKD this whole time? I mean, he looks the most like him out of the three of us.
That's true. That would be an interesting twist. I look forward to that. So the Ganymede Takeover was published in 1967.
David, let me tell you what was happening in 1967.
Cool.
All right, so there's a couple of, like, this is a really interesting year. But so we had the Summer of Love that we talked about, all the things we've talked about in past episodes.
Larry, what was the Summer of Love again? Is that where all those hippies
all
were
the
fucking?
hippies got together, yeah.
Okay.
In San Francisco and all that.
All right.
But Thurgood Marshall, I don't know if you mentioned this, but Thurgood Marshall was nominated as the first Black Supreme Court justice. And the Rolling Stone magazine debuted that year.
Oh.
And PBS was created that year.
Oh, those are interesting facts of 1960.
Yeah, what a year, right? A lot of new and important things happened that year.
Well, and a lot of people are crediting 1968 as being the year that is almost as shitty as this year.
Oh, yeah.
Like when people debate which is the shittier year, it's always 1968 versus... So 1967 having a bunch of cool things happen in it is interesting. I mean, it did have the 6-Day War, which was not cool.
Yeah.
Nicely done, Larry.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first Super Bowl, too. So...
Right?
Yeah. All right. So should we...
New sports ball for Anthony.
You give a fuck about your sports ball.
Yeah. Well, you know, we don't talk about that here, anyways. So, shall we get into the writing and publication history of the Ganymede Takeover?
I don't see why not.
All right. The Ganymede Takeover is unlike a lot of the other Philip K. Dick books. It had kind of a false start in 64.
In that it makes sense all the way through.
Yeah.
I'm just fucking with you. Go on, David.
It kind of got a false start in 1964, being that it was a collaboration, but the bulk of the writing happened after Counterclock World and right before Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. So he was kind of in...
So the first thing I want to know is how they wrote it. Did they pass pages back and forth? Did one person write it and then the other person went through and did a draft?
Well,
that's what I want to know.
We do have some quotes on that, but what we know is that the idea for the Ganymede Takeover happened at these brainstorming sessions that they had with the San Francisco Bay Area science fiction writers group that included PKD, Tony Boucher, Mary Zimmer Bradley, and Ray Nelson, and that they would sit around and throw around ideas. And as we'll see when we get into the quotes, that they had 3 projects that they were planning to work on together. And the first of which was The Unteleported Man, but eventually Ace told PKD that we want you to do this on their own, which in hindsight might have been a bad choice, because I think Ganymede Takeover is a stronger book than The Unteleported Man, and maybe they would have gotten something more coherent. And then...
And I still haven't gone back to read that one, so I have failed our fans so far. But I'll eventually read it.
It's all right. Cosmic Puppets retrospective.
Yeah.
Do we still hate it? The answer is yes.
And the third project that they intended to work on together, and it's believed that this project and Unteleported Man were supposed to be warm-up, or for them to get used to writing with each other so they could work on a book called Ring of Fire, which was intended to be a sequel to Man in the High Castle. So
that would have been interesting.
Yeah. And
Anthony's out.
Anthony says no.
I'm so out.
But I think if Ray Nelson was there, it might be interesting.
You know what? We'll get into it, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, so Anthony, do you have the quotes in front of you? Because we have a Ray Nelson quote where Ray Nelson's talking about that. We have more Ray Nelson quotes than we have PKD quotes on this book.
What Ray said was, "In the dream, I remembered the brainstorming sessions I had with Phil and the many other members of the San Francisco Bay Area science fiction community on those lazy Sunday afternoons in East Oakland. 3 outlines for novels had been developed during these sessions, during which everyone threw ideas into the common pool, and I had gone home to put the resulting chaos into some sort of order. Only the first, the Ganymede Takeover, was actually written and published.
All right, so so it's interesting to hear that everybody was kind of throwing ideas in there.
Well, but were they all throwing ideas in there to like the same, like, did Marion Zimmer Bradley say, okay, I have this idea, and then they all workshopped that idea together, or did they all just kind of break off and talk about their own ideas with whoever else was in the room?
If it's anything like our writing group was, it's just you talk about a story idea and people just throw out ideas and you incorporate it into your...
Okay. Well, I wasn't there, Larry, so I wouldn't know that, would I?
It's too bad.
Well, and I think that the Unteleported Man and Ganymede Takeover were the ones that kind of got thrown around there. And then this sequel that we never got. But it's interesting because it also makes you wonder, because through our Tony Boucher research and for the Tony Boucher episode, which everyone should go back and listen to if they haven't listened to that one, Tony Boucher was definitely kind of like the head of the show, or kind of like the person that was kind of guiding things, which was smart because he was an editor and he did publish one of the biggest magazines in science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah.
And a big editor, but also the elder statesman of the community. And I have a feeling that, they're probably going to be listening if Tony Boucher is sitting there saying like, no, I think you should go with that idea, or what you need are telepathic worms from Ganymede or whatever, like he said. And look, the elephant in the room is that this is pretty much the same story as Game Players of Titan.
I disagree. When you told me that, I was looking for it. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it. They're not playing marbles to win back the human race.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm talking about is it's very similar to Game Players of Titan, that you just have outer solar system worm creatures.
In a very generic way, yeah. It's
okay. Well, yeah.
Well, I guess the way to put it would be that not since the Game Players of Titan have we read a Dick book that deals with an alien invasion. That's really what you're saying.
Yeah. And so this alien invasion story.
But the cars still talk.
It's true.
That's true. And I think one of the things that is kind of mentioned in Divine Invasions is that there's also this feeling that this particular storyline, the Ganymede Takeover, might have also had its roots in sequelizing Man in the High Castle, because the aspect of the Southern plantation and the Tennessee aspects were one that Ray Nelson and Philip K. Dick threw around in relation to setting it in the Greater Reich. Yeah. And so there was talk at one point that aspect of it, and we do know that Phil liked to reuse story elements from here and there.
So in your guys' research, either one of you come across anything putting Ray Nelson in Tennessee or having anything to do with the state of Tennessee? Because we know that Philip K. Dick always does Colorado and San Francisco area. That's like where he sticks to everything. And when he goes to the South, it's usually like Atlanta or New Orleans that we've seen in the past. So I think it's interesting that it's Tennessee.
I think he just needed the plantation setting and the South. So I think they kind of had to pick one of the states in the South, and I'm not sure. I didn't see any indication to why Tennessee.
Couldn't find any reason.
No, I think Nelson grew up mostly in New York and then moved around to Chicago, Michigan. It says on the very reliable Wikipedia page that he also worked with Michael Moorcock in Paris, but I can't find anything linking him to
to Moorcock. Huh.
No, linking him to Tennessee or really any of the southern states, which is fine.
Yeah,
it could be arbitrary.
Yeah, and Nelson and Dick's relationship was one that PKD really felt, and there's lots of quotes on this going back to our Lies Inc. episode where we talked about this, is that PKD saw Ray Nelson as somebody who got him, who understood his ideas, somebody that he could meld his vision with very seamlessly. And certainly Kim Stanley Robinson in his book on Philip K. Dick said that it's kind of meaningless to try and figure out who wrote what and to look at the separation because it's very hard to see that. And it appears that Ray Nelson was attempting to write in a PKD pastiche.
So that gets back to my question. How did they write it?
Well, but I don't think it is written in a PKD pastiche, and I know Larry and I briefly touched on this, but I think it is much more of a cohesive narrative than a lot of the other Dick books. There isn't four storylines crammed into one. There's four different things happening, and it all kind of makes sense and coalesces by the end.
I think David's right, and I think you're right as well. But it does have the basic Dick structure, but the it's just better. I think it's just better put together. The characters are more clear. They're more characters. Like if Dick has any characters, they have like 2 or 3 characteristics.
Stop me if I'm mistaken, but no one's going through a divorce in this one.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe Nelson was like
characteristics, but then in this book, everybody has 4 or 5 characteristics. You know, there's just more depth and more cohesion everywhere you look. But ultimately, it comes back to mostly being Dick's style.
Well, and what's interesting too is because we have seen a few of the books that are very cohesive, like within the oeuvre. We've seen a lot that didn't, you know. So we still have. Personally, I thought Martial Time Slip, for example, was cohesive. I thought Three Stigmata was cohesive. You know, but I think I'm wondering if Ray Nelson had the ability to rein in Phil in a way that editors didn't feel comfortable with because it's a completed work that they're having sent to them, right? Where Ray Nelson's like, hey, we can do this while we're still working on it, and that he might be able to rein him in a way. But the lack of divorce in the story could be explained a little bit by the next quote that we have from Ray Nelson, where he talks about how they were kind of practicing for the big one, but he also gets into some of the characters and relationship. Anthony?
Since we were only practicing for the big one, we wrote the book we did in a spirit of almost hysterical hilarity, enclosing weird newspaper clippings and Beetle bubblegum cards in the installments of the ongoing story we mailed back and forth. So, Larry, that answers your question. That sounds like a nightmare, by the way, having to wait for somebody to mail me a piece of a manuscript. When we met, first at his place in East Oakland and later at his other place in Marin County near the water, we often spent more time smoking grass, dropping acid, and flirting with each other's wives than working. So, did Ray Nelson come in here and be like, where's the bowl to put your keys in, Dick? Not for nothing is Takeover dedicated to both Kirsten and Nancy. Joan Hiyashi is a composite in many ways of these two remarkable women, and many of the concepts and plot twists were contributed by them in the non-stop brainstorming that always formed a part of our relationship. We never actually swapped wives or swung, yet the emotional involvement of this foursome went far beyond what normally passes for friendship between two married couples. So they were like spiritual swingers, you guys.
There was probably some heavy petting.
They probably got drunk and then like, how'd I up on this side of the couch?
Yeah, right. Really close talking between the two couples.
So I think we got from this quote a lot of good details about how their partnership worked. They were mailing pages back and forth. Yeah. We didn't have we didn't have to consult Divorcepedia because the framing of their friendship was this like weird foursome that they had.
Happily married foursome.
Yeah, that they all got along as couples. And I did see in Divine Invasions there was quotes about how they both loved each other's like wives at the time, and that was like that definitely formed part of their partnership, that they all hung out together. I like, and he kind of outs Phil there by talking about dropping acid, because Phil famously tries to always say that
I only did it twice.
Only did it twice.
Well, I think Phil, and look, I am not a Dick scholar by any means, but I think from what I've gathered in the last couple of years is that his relationship with drug use and how it conflicts with his own moral philosophy was always a battle for him. Like he's always trying to swing one way or the other, and it's a constant thing with him.
Maybe he wasn't sure what he wanted his image to be, but he knew he didn't want it to be drug addict. He knew that was what he wanted to be. So
because now you can say, yeah, I've done drugs and whatever and dropped acid, and people are like, yeah, that's just part of the like a writer's process or whatever. But then I think it would probably be more stigmatized.
Yeah.
Well, and it wouldn't be a Philip K. Dick novel without a rejected, stupid name. And so,
really?
Yeah, we have another rejected title, rejected by Ace. But there's also controversy over just how shitty the title was, because, and we'll get to that in a second, but
if it's in the notes, I didn't read it yet.
Okay.
I'm ready.
In a letter to his agent, Scott Meredith, in 1968, PKD wrote, "I am very anxious to get back from Ace the outline for The Stones Rejected, retitled by Ace.
What?
The Ganymede Takeover."
The Stones Rejected.
Now, you tell me. I don't know what
that might be a good title, but not for this book.
For what?
Yeah.
A reboot of like the Philosopher's Stone or some shit?
I don't know.
The Stones Rejected. Take your fucking magic.
Not this book.
I have no idea what The Stones Rejected means, but that
has more in line with Game Players of Titan. I guess stones, marbles. You figure it out.
Okay, so an editor, Terry Carr, who was, as we all remember from our interview with Betsy Woolheim, was Don Woolheim's right-hand dude. Terry Carr wrote, Ray's mentioning that the Ganymede Takeover was originally titled Earth's Diurnal Course is a bit...
Right, we went over that.
Yeah, a bit confusing to me, because Ray is right in doing so. That though the title would have been In Earth's Diurnal Course...
Wait, hold on. That was a different title for a different book.
That was Dr. Blood Money.
Well, that's just it. There's a confusion, because at some point Ray Nelson said that the original title was In Earth's Diurnal Course, and Terry Carr in this quote is saying, no.
And he shot himself after reading it, yeah, because it's a terrible title.
Yeah, and so Terry Carr just goes on to say, no, that was, he says, till Scott Meredith changed it, it surprises me that Phil had earlier put that title on some other novel published by Ace, and it was Don who changed it. I think it was Dr. Blood Money or How We Got Along After the Bomb.
Yeah.
So like, Ray Nelson at some point was telling people that that Ganymede Takeover was also called An Earth's Diurnal Course.
Huh.
So,
God, that title sucks. That title sucks.
Yes.
It's awful.
So do we all agree, because we have to do this every time there is an original title, that the Ganymede Takeover is a far superior title for this?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good title.
It's actually a good title, yeah.
For once I thought, no, it's not a bad title.
Yeah. And, okay, so, and then after the Terry Carr quote, there's another Ray Nelson quote, and this is the last one talking about the 3 projects that they were working on. Anthony, did you want to read that one? Only the first?
Only the first. The Ganymede Takeover was actually written and published. It has since been repeatedly published in the USA, England, France, and Germany. The second, The Whalemouth Colony, was later recycled by Phil in part. The third, Invest, The Ring of Fire remains to this day little more than an outline and a lot of scribbles on odd bits of paper, and perhaps, if I haven't erased it, a tape recording of a brainstorming session. Is the whale mouth colony
Unteleported man.
teleport me? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That's what I thought.
And so,
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
he does talk about Ring of Fire in Divine Invasions, and there's more details here. It says, the most important fantasized project was Ring of Fire, which Phil conceived as a sequel to High Castle. Nelson writes that the title refers to a ring of volcanoes, earthquake faults around the edge of the North Pacific Ocean, which corresponds to the Japanese Empire. In the story, a remarkably creative society called Amera-Asia came into being, produced a few immortal works of art combining Eastern and Western influences, and then was destroyed along with all of its artists, writers, and musicians on the first day of World War III, which ends Ring. There's also discussion of a third volume of a trilogy based on Man in the High Castle. Nelson recalls it described the brief and apocalyptic war that almost exterminated humanity, but ended in a note of hope as a new religion uniting the best elements. The previous religion arises in the ruins. We were going to call it our Amera-Asian trilogy. So they talked a lot about it, and actually, I think that sounds
I
interesting.
think it's Amerasian.
Yeah.
Amerasian.
Amera-Asian. And, but I think those sound really interesting myself. But
Yeah, they had potential.
yeah,
Sure.
in the majority of the details about Phil and Ray's relationship are between the pages of 136 and 142 of Divine Invasions. That's where they really kind of talk about their friendship and relationship. And according to Divine Invasions, it says, Phil never much liked LSD. He only took it a few times, despite wild rumors. But in 1964, he dropped acid on at least 2 occasions with Ray Nelson. Nelson recalled that during his trip, Phil was sweating, feeling isolated. And this LSD experience, according to a July 1974 letter, inspired The Maze of Death, which we will do next season. So The Maze of Death came out of Trippin' Balls with Ray Nelson. So, and it does give details that Ray Nelson's wife was from Norway. She had immigrated from Norway. And she has this quote that says about Phil, I don't know that he exactly fell in love with me so much as he kind of adopted me. I think he cast me in the role of his dead sister.
Ooh. He did that a lot.
I mean, that wouldn't be shocking because he's
Yeah.
Obsessed.
Yeah, and so, and you get a little bit of details here in Divine Invasions on the, the whole like trading manuscripts through the mail, and that appears to be how they did it. They would.
Now, isn't that how
annoying?
How Straub and King wrote the Talisman as well?
No, the Straub and King collaboration was early word processors, and they were sending floppy disks to each other.
Well, it's the same.
So they're still mailing it though.
Yeah, but they were able to put in and have one file to work off of, I suppose. Whereas
I guess.
This is 1967, so it's not like you can send a thumb drive, dudes. You gotta send papers, and they probably got to be retyped a bunch of times, and that's just what it is.
Yeah.
And then
I don't think Larry and I are saying there's anything wrong with it. I think we're just commenting on the fact that trying to do that now would be a huge pain in the ass because we're privileged modern babies.
Right?
Our privileged modern.
I think we would lose our minds if we had to do that.
I get mad when the internet doesn't work for 2 minutes. Yeah. So.
Right, and but it
4 seconds to download. Fuck this.
Fuck yeah. How long?
So that's all I have on the writing and publication history. What I will say about it is that it is the only And this, of course, became a problem for both all of us in the process of getting this book for the episode. It's the only PKD book that is not currently in print in the United States. So, we had,
Which
yeah,
is
it was
why-
not an easy book to get, and it was more expensive for me than.
yeah, and so I had the British edition, which and I had to order it twice. It's a long story, but it got sent to my.
Oh, Larry got that good edition though.
Yeah.
the
Hold
H.
that up, yeah. I can't share my edition because now is the time for me to tell everybody how I was able to listen to this because David found a. Was it David or you, Larry? Which one of you
It was
sent me?
David.
This? It was David, right?
David found the PDF.
David found a YouTube video, which is an audiobook that Jennifer Murtha and Stephen Davis did of the Ganymede Takeover.
Wow.
And I say
shout out
this
to
would be
them.
the only way. Yeah, huge shout out to them for saving me because I've gotten so used to downloading every Dick book we do now on my Kindle because I can highlight, I can make notes, I can access all those notes. It's very easy. And I went to download it a week before we recorded to read the book a week ahead of time, and I couldn't find it. And I was like, well, fuck me, I guess. So yeah, I listened to the Ganymede Takeover, and I don't know. It was certainly difficult. I don't like audiobooks. I don't know how you guys are about audiobooks.
I don't like it either.
I went through a phase where I liked them, but
typically I don't care for audiobooks because it's actually harder for me to remember things, I think. And so the character names and all this, aside from Percy X and a few other characters, I can't remember a whole lot of names associated with actions, so you have to forgive me. I will say that one of the characters, the voice actor for the Doctor, sounded just like Mr. Garrison on South Park, which made listening to this really fun for me. But yeah, so audiobook, and it was and David, is there a reason why it's not available here?
Probably because of the rights issues with Ray Nelson's estate.
Okay. But he's not dead.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really know exactly why, but
Ray Nelson's estate.
Oh, he's still alive? Oh.
Yeah, he's 88, dog.
Okay.
Unless his website hasn't been updated.
Usually they're pretty good with dead things.
Yeah.
The fact that there isn't an estate he may not have liked the terms of the U.S.
whatever deal.
For whatever reason.
Yeah, the publishing aspects of the Ganymede Takeover, it's weird because there are British editions, so he was fine with that apparently. But
there are French editions as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming that because they made it, and this is my assumption, with both Vintage and Mariner, I think that they made a blanket deal for the entire catalog. And since Ray Nelson may not, I think Rogers, I'm not, with Jesus, I don't know too where that fits into it either.
Yeah.
But because of their co-author projects, they probably cannot include it in the entire purchase of the rights to all of them.
Yeah, it would have to be dealt with separately.
Would have to be dealt with separately. And Zelazny has passed away, so you're dealing with his estate, and there might be less issues with, having to keep. I don't know. I could see an estate being less concerned about wanting a certain amount of money, whereas somebody who's like, "Hey, I wrote this book, and I co-wrote this book, and I want to have my say on it." But I'm just guessing. I don't know for sure. I couldn't find a lot of details on that because I did look for that. And, most of Ray Nelson's quotes about it are just about the process, not about, there was nothing about, the reasons why. But yeah, I was surprised too, because I just assumed that Mariner had all of them. And so when I started.
Yeah. It really came back to bite me in the ass that time. The latest edition I could find is 1995.
Okay. Was it a vintage? Was it in the vintage series?
Uh,
I don't think so. I already closed out of the window though, so I cannot confirm.
The vintage was that's the 94 or 92 ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think mid-90s is when they stopped
Yeah.
producing this. So
Yeah, so that's it for the writing and story publication history. So you know what that
Cool.
means. You know what time it is, Anthony.
Time to get out.
It's time to get ill.
Story breakdown.
Bring it down.
Whammy bar.
Slapping the bass.
All right, I get to mute my mic now.
I'm gonna mute my mic and
You muted before you said anything. Oh man, I'm so lonely. That's all right. I'm always lonely.
You're on your own, dude.
All right. Here is my book report on the Ganymede Takeover by Philip K. Dick and that guy who invented the propeller hat. Wait, this means we can't hear you guys laughing.
Oh, fine. I'll turn my mic on.
So, where do we start? We start with chapter 1. Which side is chapter 1? Chapter 1, the Ganymedean Jabba worms. So, this book starts with the Jabba worms of Ganymede taking over the Earth and in a war, and it was considered World War III. The year is like 2047 at this point, and they basically, instead of enslaving everyone, they just kept everything going pretty much as normal, and just they own the Earth. And they said, cool, we'll keep control of you until eventually we do enslave you, use you in some way. But the Ganymedians aren't adept at this. This is not their central thing. This is like a new idea. We'll become conquerors of worlds. So they like it more in idea than they do in practice. And our guy here, Mechus, was against the war, and Mechus was against the war, and now because he was against the war, he gets to be in charge of the worst territory on the planet. And everyone knows the worst territory on the planet is Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm not a Tennessee fan, I gotta say.
Fuck the Titans. All right. So he likes this so much that he faints from hatred. That's how much he likes his new job. All right, so we meet him. We meet his creatures, who are basically bred slave labor that hold all the jobs because our Jabba worms cannot move. They can move a little bit, but they don't have arms or legs. They can't manipulate things other than with their tongue. And so they're kind of gross, blah, blah, blah. They're psychic creatures, blah, blah, blah. On to Joan Hayashi, who is basically a VH1 host of a stupid show.
Hayashi.
We're going with Hayashi. Okay.
Is there a CH or an S? I thought it was SH.
Oh yeah, it is SH.
Sorry.
You're right. Hayashi. And she's a VH1 host. And she's like pretty shitty at her job. Even though she loves it, she does shitty music. And she is told so by our hero, Percy X. But that's later. So we meet her. She's going to Tennessee to meet up with Percy X and get some good music from the natives of Tennessee, the backwoods sort of real sound of the colored folk in 2047. That's her cover story. But it turns out she's a shitty spy. And then we meet the pimp. We meet Paul Rivers, pimp psychiatrist, who we meet laying out on a beach with a naked woman there, just ready to service him from the sex clubs of America or something. I don't know what they're called, but that's close enough. And then he's like, oh man, the office called, said I got to go do this job where I got to protect this dude. All right, I'm off. And then he leaves, sort of like 007 style. I'll see you later, baby. So he leaves. Then we go back to where Joan's staying. We meet Gus Swingard. How do you say that name? Anybody got a clue? No clue.
You're asking me?
Oh, I'm trying to ask Anthony, but he's not paying attention. Fucking
I was letting you
millennial.
do your thing. I was letting you do your thing.
Yeah, but I said names. Gus Sweensgard?
Gus Swensgard.
Swensgard? All right, Gus Swensgard, who is a clever hick burger extraordinaire. That's how I've described him. Then we meet, and Gus is like, gee, I don't know. I don't think you want to go see those guys up there. They're pretty whacked out. And he sounds like he's not going to be a smart guy at all. Turns out he's much smarter than you would believe, but not as smart as he thinks he is. And so Joan is getting ready to go. Gus pats her on the head. Paul Rivers says, hey, can I go with you? Goes to get a gun. She takes off. And then she gets a call from her boss, Marshall Coley, who we find out for some reason they don't know that our hero Percy X is a psychic. And so they get this new information. Marshall Coley's like, oh, shit. Well, there goes my chances for that skin, because Marshall Coley's big thing is skin. Marshall Coley is a Ganymedian worm, Jabba, by the way. But he's into skin collecting. He is all about getting skin. He wants human skins for his wall, so he can have skins of humans hanging from his wall with the teeth and everything. So he's normal. He's a normal guy. We go to the mountains where Lincoln and Percy X are talking. Lincoln is his number one. You are my number one. So they're talking about.
Hey, I'm wearing a shirt for that movie right now.
Nice. They have a conversation.
That was a good Jack Palance, Larry.
Thanks. So they're talking about shit. They're like, hey, what do we do next? You know, we've got stuff to do. We gotta. Oh yeah, you do. Nothing's working out right, but we got to figure out how we're going to take over everything. Apparently, I'm the last chance for human beings, according to the Psychiatrist Association of the World. Joan then gets phone call, like I was saying, gets phone call from her boss, and he's like, dude, you can't go there. What are you doing? And she's like, well, why can't I go there? I got this thing where I'm going to kill him, right? It's going to be cool. And he's like, no, he's a psychic. He's going to figure it out. She's like, ah, shit. So I guess I'm just going to stand in the middle of nowhere for a while. And then she meets up with a couple of the dudes from Percy's group. What are they called? The Neeg?
Well, they call it the Neeg parts. Like
Neeg
the
parts. They are called the Neeg parts.
Yeah, which
The
is
Neeg parts.
a little...
We'll get there. And then,
We all get it.
yeah, so these two guys are like, we're going to kill that bitch. And then she gets saved by Percy X because Percy X knows her. They went to college together. And so Percy's like, no, she's cool. She'll come with me. And then we get this whole scene where Percy is explaining, like, there's a spirituality. You know, the Neeg parts isn't just a group of people. It's also a religion, just like the Jewish people are a people and a religion. And there's a spiritual element to what we're doing. And it's more than just saving humanity. It's bringing a new viewpoint into the world and trying to get rid of racism by killing the Wicks. That's sort of the plan. Anyway, so yeah, immediately that's dropped from the book. Oh, the Mechus is coming into town. Gus is like, I can catch that boy for you. And this is after Gus has this plan to dig out this old shelter that has a bunch of chicks in it that he's going to have and make money off of. Turns out the chicks aren't chicks. They're guns, very special guns. And turns out Gus doesn't get it because the Neegs actually kill his foreman and render him unable to move, and they steal all the guns. Then cut to Gus waking up with Marshall, what's his face? Marshall Skin Collector. And he's like, well, you really fucked up. I'm going to collect your skin. And then Gus says, no, wait, I got a plan. I can catch the guys, get the guns back, and then I'll fix this whole problem. You'll get your skin. I'll keep my skin. Everything will work out. Because I planted when I patted the girl on the head, I actually put a little tracker on there. So I know where she is, and she's with the dude. Let's do this thing.
There was also a bra transmitter.
Yeah, well, she got that. She smashed on a rock. So anyway, so that happens. So what happens is they're all lying in a pile. The Neegs are lying in a pile, and they're doing this song, and it's really cool. And it's really spiritual, and it's something that Joan has never heard before, so she wants to record it. Then after her and Percy had banged, they're sleeping in the pile, and then he's stroking her hair. He feels the tracker. He's like, oh shit, we're fucked. And then they are fucked, because then these really cool tracker missiles start coming at them, and then Lincoln gets blown up. So, R.I.P. Lincoln. And then Percy X gets blown up. Joan tries to save him, but they end up getting kidnapped by the boss. The plan works. It's great. But Mechus is coming quick to town because he has a plan to do other things. And then so Marshall Skin Collector is like, oh man, I need to get that guy before Mechus gets here. But it's too late. Mechus shows up. Mechus is like, I want to be in charge right now. You can go just sign the papers or whatever. And so what's his face there? Coley's like, hey, you like models? You ever seen airplanes from World War I? It's just a delay tactic that is pretty funny, where he's like, yeah, well, there's all these models. Yeah, sign the papers. No, wait a second. How do you feel about automobiles? And then he's like, oh, I also have post-World War I models. I've got tons of models that you got to check out. He's like, sign the fucking papers. And then he's like, no, I can't sign the papers. I need that skin. Give me that skin. All right. So then he signs the papers. Mechus says, all right, yeah, we're not taking his skin. We're not killing anybody. I have a plan where I'm going to put Percy X in charge, and that'll bring all these people together, and somehow Tennessee will be great. I really don't care what his plan is, because nothing he does works until the end. And so Mechus finds that Percy might be a little too uppity for him, as Percy tries to strangle him immediately. And Mechus is like, all right, we got to send him to the doctor. This is the best character, by the way, is Dr. Rudolph Balkany. He is a crazy-ass mad scientist who invented all these crazy weapons when the war was happening. He's also a psychiatrist who knows all these weird, secret psychiatry things that no one is No one is, he's the top of his field, but also the crazy top of his field. And so he gets Joan and he gets Percy, and Joan he immediately puts into a sensory deprivation tank. Joan loses her mind, becomes a bodhisattva, and so she's enlightened. It's great for her, which is great. And then here along comes psychiatrist Paul Rivers and his buddy, and they're like, all right, we got to have a plan to get them out of there so we can take them back to Tennessee, do this other stuff, because now we need him to fire off this giant gun that is called the Hell Gun, because then he'll die a hero. Humanity will come together and get rid of the Ganymedian Jabba the Hutts. And so then he goes, okay, that's a good plan. They buy these robots that were actually made by Balkany, and Balkany is fooled by the robots, so fooled by the robots that he falls in love with the robot Joan. He's like, oh, she's never changing. Nothing is changing. It's so weird. It's totally ruining my theory of what I could do with people's minds. And so that goes on for a while. And meanwhile, now that the Percy's gone, Gus is trying to round up the rest of the crew, and turns out Lincoln didn't die, which is like not talked about at all. Like, oh, it's sad that he blew up. And they don't talk about how the guns got to the Neeg party. They just kind of like all of a sudden they're using them. So that was kind of dumb. And then so the war goes back and forth for a while. There's other plans, blah, blah, blah. Mechus gets really into Balkany's work. He's like, oh, I don't care what's going on outside. I need to understand this Balkany thing. I've become a new kind of creature. I'm no longer part of the collective of the Ganymede Jabba the Hutts. I am my own thing. And I am the smartest being in the universe. And then meanwhile, Balkany is like, God, I love this robot. I don't know she's a robot, but I love her. I love her so much, I have to kill her. And he bashes in her brain. And then once he finds out she's a robot, he figures out the end to his book, writes the end of his book, and then commits suicide by injection. End of his story. We go back to town. Gus is doing his thing. He sees a plan where he can become not only the master of Tennessee, but the king of the world. And then we're going back and forth. The Psychiatry Society wants Paul to maybe just kill Percy X, or maybe have him fire off the gun. It vacillates for a while. We don't know. And then eventually Paul has to kill Percy X because he doesn't want him to fire off the Hell Gun, but he fails at killing Percy X in a great scene where we find out that time is relative, and because the gun has already been fired in the future, they're feeling the effects of the gun in the past. And there's also a great weapon that is basically turning off the sun. The Ganymedians decide they're going to leave. They're like, fuck this being conqueror shit. We're going home. We're going to not do this again. This is stupid. This was a bad idea. What we'll do is we'll just turn off the sun. It'll freeze the planet. Everything will die. We'll thaw it out, and then we'll own a planet that's alive but doesn't have any stupid creatures on it. And it seems like a good plan. But Percy presses the button. Everybody disappears, goes into pure blackness, loses all their senses. Basically, it's a universal sensory deprivation. And Mechus's plan to connect with the rest of the Ganymedians works. Every one of them dies because they don't know how to function without the collective and without their senses, because they're so psychic or whatever. And then everyone has their real solipsistic trip. And because Joan has ascended to enlightened state. She's actually cool with what's happening, and so she saves the day. Percy gets killed because the button really fucked him up, or Paul fucked him up and the button fucked him up. Gus decides he's going to be president of the world because everyone's ecstatic that they're no longer non-entities. He says, I'm going to go on TV and say I'm king of the world. And so he goes on TV, but he has a dark shadow that remains that's illusory. And then the dark shadow is like, you suck. And Gus is like, I don't suck, but I do kind of suck. And so it doesn't work out. He doesn't become king of the world right away. And then the shrinks are like, don't worry, Gus. We'll run your campaign to be king of the world. The end.
Whew. Now, in your edition, Larry, does it call because mine it's called the Hell Weapon. Was it called the Hell Gun?
Hell Gun, Hell Weapon, I don't care.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So, yeah, that's the story breakdown. Let's get into the themes a little bit and close this out.
The biggest thing I didn't talk about was the coolest thing in the book, though, was those guns. The illusion guns.
The illusion projector, because that's my favorite.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that. So one of the things that's interesting in the criticism of this book is that it's funny because Kim Stanley Robinson, when he talks about the Ganymede Takeover, he said that there was no useful metaphor for anything that was actually happening in our world, which I think Ray Nelson definitely disagreed with, because in Divine Invasions, there's a quote that says that the book was definitely about the Japanese imperial occupation forces and how they occupied other countries, which we know they did occupy China. It did not occupy here, but it also shows that they were pivoting from a High Castle sequel idea for this.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so that is something that was going on here. Let's talk a little bit about the Ganymedean worms. You referred to them as Jabbas, but
that's what they were to me. And their creatures were salacious crumbs.
Yeah, and they're described very well as early as page 3 with he was like all members of the Ganymedian ruling species, legless, armless, pink, and very much like a large worm in appearance. And I like how they point out, like, they think of the humans as poor creatures, and they're like, you should have never let us know you were here. And that their way or their system is first conquer, occupy, then absorb. That's the way it's done. And
yeah, that's the way it's described at the beginning. But by the end, we find out that this is the first time they've done it.
Right.
It's weird. It's one of those. That is one of those Dick things where he introduces an idea at the beginning
and forgets about it.
And then forgets about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ray didn't fix it that time.
Yeah, and I do think that they were, because we know that Ray Nelson said that they were trying to go for this Japanese occupation thing, and we've seen as early as the World Jones made where, fascist empires on Earth Dick like to turn them into weird cosmic alien things. And so I think that tradition within the PKD oeuvre goes back to
Jews into single cell organisms.
Right. And so we've got that going on here in Ganymede Takeover, but there, and you did highlight this scene, but I did like that the new ruler of Tennessee, like he really is upset about it. He's like, oh man, fuck this job. That was great. And that was really PKD, because we're getting into the whole idea of like the bureaucracy that you don't want to take part in, and it's not like he's like, yo, I get Tennessee.
Yeah, right.
And
considered the worst place in the world.
And correct me if I'm wrong.
Worst bail that you could possibly have. That's what it's called.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Was the previous worm who ran Tennessee, he was the one that was into collecting the model airplanes, right?
Yeah, model airplanes and human skins.
And he was Catholic, too, which was interesting.
And he was also Catholic.
Yeah. So I don't know what was going on there that he made that the worm be like a Catholic specifically.
Yeah, it was weird.
But that was an interesting thing that I saw there. And at one point, Mikas, like the Ganymedian worm ruler of Tennessee, tries to offer Percy X the opportunity to rule Tennessee, like as kind of a collaborator. And eventually that goes to Gus.
Yeah, I can't quite remember what Meek's plan was. Mikas's plan was.
Yeah,
because I know he wanted to put one person in charge of Tennessee to make it, because right now it's split into territories with different burghers running different areas and sort of feudal system that they have there. But he wanted to basically make a governor of the whole place, but that's his job. So I didn't understand really what.
Well,
if it helps, Larry, I didn't understand anything because of listening to it. I couldn't write things down as I listened to so much of it while I was driving. That I am so not focused and dialed in on what's going on in this book that I don't
that's
even
the problem
think
I have with audiobooks.
Ratings. Yeah,
audiobooks
same.
in general is like there's just there. I need that connection, that visual.
Yeah.
Connection.
So if I don't talk a whole lot about the actual book itself, it's because honestly I'll probably reread it when I find a print copy. But continue. The burgers rule all. Go on.
Yeah. Well, that was his plan.
Yeah. And I like that the kind of like the attempt to kind of take back control by the human society was the World Psychiatric Association.
Yeah, right.
and so we have some kind of funny, weird moments with, and this comes into the kind of PKD underrated satire thing that's going on here. And I don't know. I mean, you talked about it in the story breakdown, but for me, one of the interesting elements was that Percy X was kind of, they're like, that, you know, the World Psychiatric Association basically comes in and says like, hey, we kind of need you to die as a martyr.
Yeah, they want him to be a martyr.
Yeah, and
if he doesn't, basically, he's considered the last hope of humanity. But if he does get captured and skinned, then all of humanity is doomed, vaguely doomed.
Yeah.
But if he dies a martyr, then humanity might rise up, I guess is the idea behind that.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because we've now seen 2 books in a row between the Archbishop and Percy X that PKD is playing with the idea of black radicals.
Mm-hmm.
In an interesting.
Well, it is the time to, to play with that idea. There's a lot of black radicals out there fighting for freedom. So. Yeah,
and well, he's not as fleshed out as I would like. The existence of Percy X in this story, I think, is very important, and I like it. And I actually wish there was more focus on Percy X. That's one of the few things that I thought was missing here.
Yeah, I thought he should have been more central.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Sorry, I dipped for one quick second. Are we discussing the fact that Percy X is just Malcolm X?
Yeah,
stand-in.
Yeah,
basically.
And that between 4 O'Clock World and this book, he's done it twice in a row. Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, and so, which is interesting because Do Androids, which is the next book.
Well, you could say that the what's his face from Counterclock was more of an MLK figure than a Malcolm X figure. So basically, he would do the 2 biggest leaders that we know of from that era, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.
I don't know. I think
novels in a row.
I think Peak and Clockwork was a little bit more militant, but not as directly obvious as Percy X here. But and that is definitely one of those things. And I think so. And Joan, being a collaborator to capture Percy X, that gets a little bit into our themes with like, well, we don't have a divorcing like angry wife here. We do have the love interest in Joan, who's obviously inspired by.
This is an unrequited love interest for Percy X.
She was inspired by the two wives, as we know from reading about the research, that she does collaborate to a certain degree to
but at least her story, her backstory, gives her reason, to be the way she is, and it's not just, oh, she's a bitch because she's a woman.
Yeah, and Balkanini, creating all these weapons, but his most important one is that he blocks the telepathy of the Ganymedians. Is kind of important, and it's funny because, well, we never got the word precog, or we never got like
we did get. I think we got precog once, and we got simulacra once.
Yeah, there was less of the.
There was no auto cars.
No, the ionicraft.
Yeah, ionicraft.
Yeah, so I think I'm assuming that Nelson might have been the one saying like, "Hey, let's use some different words."
I think so too.
Yeah, and
robots were called robots.
Yeah, they were actually called robots. Yeah, but and yes, and I'll agree with you that Balkanini, like developing the weapon.
Nanny.
Yeah, that
he might be a ninny, but it's not in his name.
I do think he was one of the more interesting characters in the book. I don't know if he was my favorite necessarily, but
I love that character because he was so right about a lot of things and so wrong about a lot of things.
Right. So to me, like the kind of the coolest aspects of the Ganymede Takeover for me are I like the fact that we're getting a slightly different voice, being that it's a collaboration, that all the Dick elements are there, but it's slightly different. And so I did really enjoy that. And I kind of wish that we had gotten all three of the books that they had wanted to work together on. And
I mean, more is better.
Yeah.
And as they collaborated, it would probably get even more Ray Nelson-y.
But I think the Ray Nelson elements, it's funny because a lot of people would think that we, as being the DickHeads, that we would kind of not welcome the collaboration, but I welcome the collaboration because
who said that?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying some people might think that because
some people think that we can't dislike any of Dick's books and then like Philip K. Dick though. So fuck them.
True. It's true.
For me, the coolest elements of the book, one thing, I love the shaft, the dart fired from orbit to as a weapon. That was great because that like presupposes drone warfare in a cool way. But to me, the absolute best moment of the whole book, besides the Winking Mountain, which I really liked, which is better than
really good,
better than Boob Mountain, the Winking Mountain.
That was the mountain coming to life and smashing people. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments, but the illusion projector was definitely the most hilarious and weirdest moment, and I don't know how it translated in audiobook, but I know on the written page.
It was interesting. Is that the scene where it's all the different like monster things that show up to battle? There's like
the Girl Scouts and the
Girl Scouts and like
the vampires.
Tiny, what is it? What did he say? 1-inch lesbians.
1-inch lesbians.
The best part being the battalion of brownie scouts cracking skulls right and left with overbaked cookies.
4 cross-dressers.
Red-assed baboons charged in between him, pushing Superman.
Not the aardvarks. That was,
A rock and roll group headed by a young, long-haired trumpeter named Gabriel played the jerk while a team of trained surgeons removed one appendix after another, throwing in an occasional lobotomy to avoid monotony. That whole scene was fucking hilarious.
yeah.
Um,
And well done. Just bizarre as hell.
So anyways, unless you guys have anything else on the story and the
Yes, there's tons. Like there's an entire there's like 5 different religions. There's solipsism. There's I think therefore I am. Descartes is in there. Buddhism and Islam, which is only touched on, but the Buddhism is very important. Gnosticism is heavily in there. We're looking at like all of that Joan storyline is basically Buddhism,
Right.
and then with the a Gnostic flair, let's say, because there's the male female thing on all that jazz, the sexual part.
Mm-hmm.
The psychology. There's Jung. I know they talk about Freud, but it's not Freudian. But
there's like a whole Freud robotic bust, isn't there?
Yeah.
That I believe that he. Oh, well, that's that other interesting scene where he kills his robot. Is his android girlfriend or assistant just because he's an asshole?
Robot. Yeah. He's a psycho.
Yeah.
But
I think I would have retained so much more of this stuff in such a different way if I had been able to read it.
But yeah, there's
Sorry,
all that
everybody.
stuff, and I know we have to move fast here, but those are all ideas that should be explored, and this book should not be forgotten as some it's just a dick book and Ray Nelson's name is on there or any bullshit like that.
Well, and I agree with you, Larry. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine.
I agree with Larry, and to kind of just touch on what I was saying a little bit earlier, we should be able to discuss the collaborations and without any issue, because it is something Dick was involved in. If we're talking how, that's no different than when we discuss an adaptation, which is a weird type of collaboration when somebody adapts somebody else's material. We shouldn't be put to task for that, and I don't think we should worry about it.
Look, and we're all people. The three of us have collaborated with each other on various projects, so we also know fiction-wise how much we have each put into each other's fictional projects that we've worked on together, and we know that I would never discount Ray Nelson's input or Philip K. Dick's input into this. Is that it's just interesting to want to know how much was each, of course, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. In the end, it's a book that went through both their hands and became like a creation of both of them. And so I would like to have seen, I think it would be cool to see what Phil had done in further partnership with Ray Nelson, because I think this turned out pretty good. And
I think technically, I think there's some technical parts of this that didn't work out. Like I was talking about some, like bringing the guns back, bringing Lincoln back. There's elements like that just sort of come out of the blue. Balkany being introduced so late, there's just elements that, from a technical point of view, writing point of view, were not put together properly. But other than that, I think it's a well-told, forward-moving story.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of tangential
there's
stuff.
Well,
happening.
There's a beginning, middle, and an end, and unlike certain other Dick books we've read, the beginning, middle, and the end all work together. Whereas, say for the World Jones made, each section of the book is like its own novel. Which I mean, I'm a World Jones made apologist. I think I like that book regardless, but this is not the World Jones made episode. All right, moving on.
Do Judgment, yeah. Judge.
I'm going to give the Ganymede Takeover 4 out of 5 Overbaked Brownie Scout Club Death cookies out of 5. I think overall it's a really cool book. It just, the sad thing for me is I wish that they had gotten to work together more. I think that's probably a function of Phil like leaving the Bay Area, even though I know they were doing a lot of it by mail. I think their ability to brainstorm things together was a huge part of their friendship.
Yeah.
And as somebody who collaborates with other writers, I understand that.
And you've collaborated long distance, and that's really hard to do. So
yeah. And it's more fun when you can get in the room with somebody. And I know Zoom makes it easier these days, but like,
yeah.
But
I like Zoom. Zoom's fine. I don't have to leave my house.
yeah. Like I said, Zoom makes it easier. But Ray Nelson and overall, I think Ganymede Takeover is kind of an improvement on Game Players of Titans. Like,
I don't really like the comparison, but
I don't like the comparison. But for me, I think it's a similar but better alien invasion story, which for Phil and overall, I think it's just a weird and cool book. And the whole book was made for me by the illusion projector scene. It doesn't matter what else happened in the book.
Well worth it. I will add to that in my judgment. I'm giving it 3.5 giant aardvarks, but the stories that the one guy tells about the 24 soldiers showing up, him becoming friends with one of the soldiers, and like then them slowly disappearing, and to me that made it all worthwhile. It's not just the illusions that they create, but the illusions stick around and become part of their lives. I thought that was fascinating and should have been, more of the story. Like, honestly, we find out Lincoln dies, right?
Mm-hmm.
How great would it have been if that was just Percy's hallucination of Lincoln that stuck around all the way until they're in that little room, and then boom, Lincoln disappears and Percy is left alone facing the robots and fire. I mean, to me, that would have been amazing, but that's neither here nor there. And I liked this book, and I think this could be considered one of the more underrated of his books. What do you got, Anthony?
Yeah, I agree. It's underrated.
Well, like I said, I don't think I can fairly judge this book because I listened to it as an audiobook, and it definitely changed how my brain received that information. Yeah. So I'll give the audiobook 3 creatures out of 5 because they definitely were doing their best to do some voices and to make it listenable, and the narrator is a pretty good narrator. So 3 out of 5. It could have been better produced, but it certainly was not nearly as bad as some like BS black metal demo done in somebody's broom closet. So that's a 3 out of 5 for the audiobook, and I'm gonna go ahead and maybe read the book down the road, and I'll revisit this.
That's what I want to do with Solar Lottery. I haven't done it yet, but because I only listened to the audiobook, I want to go back and read it. That's why I bought a copy. Maybe
that can be the Anthony Larry episode while David takes a break, where we just revisit stuff that we kind of didn't really read, but did.
Right, but did.
And you guys we have a break coming up, so you guys got time to do that. Okay, adaptation.
I got this one.
Oh, good. Hit us up, Langhorne.
I got this one. So first of all, this is going to be directed by, Lone Leterrier. I don't know. That's probably a butchered pronunciation of his name or her name. But the director of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance show on Netflix.
Lewis.
Is it Lewis?
Yeah.
I can't read my writing.
He directed
it's Louis Leterrier.
Yeah, he's a protege of Luc Besson. He did a bunch of those action movies for Luc Besson.
So, And I would have it done by Henson Studios. Because this, like you have, first of all, I called them Jabba the Hutt, but then they're, the creatures are basically Skeksis. You know, they're all defined by their job. That's their name. And they all have crazy different jobs. Like there's a psychic. To me, that was incredible. You have a slave race that is also like everything, every job is done by them. And they're defined by doing that job. One guy's an engineer. This other guy presses a button. You know, this one's the psychic. This one uses a hammer. Whatever it is. And the Skeksis are exactly that way. You have the, you know, the Chamberlain. You have the war guy. You have all these different jobs that they have. The man at arms, and so I would want this done by Henson Studios. I would have puppets. A lot of it would be puppets. Think how great all those illusions would be done with Henson puppets.
All right, so I like that.
No judgment. You don't think so?
No, I'm cool with that. That's not where I would go. Well, first of all, I know the marketing of this movie would be from the writers of They Live and Blade Runner, because that's how you're going to market it, because you get to do that for this one time, and or from the minds behind They Live. But I think I would focus on Percy X as your main character and do like that kind of Tennessee storyline as the, you know, from Percy X's perspective is how I would adapt it, and make it kind of like
the black hole.
I don't know if I'd call it that, but
No, it would be like the black hole.
Yeah. And that's how I would do it. Anthony?
I didn't put a whole lot of thought into this. Larry, I think we're gonna put Larry's in production because that's the most thought out. I didn't really, I don't know. Maybe James Cameron? Fuck, I don't know for this one. I really feel
the story itself, like, you know, it doesn't have to change that much.
No.
You change the names of stuff. Like, you're not going to call them the Need Crew or whatever that was.
Yeah. I definitely did not give this one a whole lot of thought. So sorry.
Yeah, it wouldn't be first on my priority list of it.
This would be not even on my list. Like, it wouldn't crack my top 10 Dick movies to put into production.
Oh, I like it. I think it would. I had a vision for it, so.
No, that's awesome. And for once, David and I didn't have a vision where we thought we were right. So
it's a nice change.
Good job. I appreciate it.
All right, to close off the show tonight, we're going to do Dicklike Suggestions. Larry, let's Langhorne J. Tweed. Why don't we start off with your Dicklike suggestion this month?
All right, sounds good, because it's a good one. This game came out a while back, but they've had steady new content up until like a couple days ago. They released the final bit of new content for the game, and it's called Control. And this one, I think you'll both like the idea behind this one. I don't know if you know what SCP Foundation is. It's basically an online story. People write stories about this holding place, a prison basically for supernatural beings or extra natural beings who have all kinds of crazy powers. So it's a bunch of short stories written by a bunch of authors all on this one subject. So there's a bunch of video games as well that are SCP related. And this one is done by Remedy Entertainment, who also made the game Alan Wake. And that's also a fantastic game. It's a game where you
I'm familiar.
are a detective and you have to stay in the light, or it's a very horror oriented. And this game, you play a woman named Jessie who's on the search for her brother, and her investigation leads her to this building that's the FBC building, which is the Federal Bureau of Control. So she enters this building. Basically, the first thing that happens, she meets a crazy janitor who points her to go a certain way. She goes into a room. She picks up a gun. The gun immediately tries to make her shoot herself in the head. And it turns out the gun decides who is going to be the director of the FBC. And boom, right away, you're the new director of the FBC. And the Federal Bureau of Control handles all supernatural stuff on the planet. Like there's an anchor that can cause people to kill themselves. There's a what do I have down here? There's an ashtray that creates a giant maze you can't get out of. There's a refrigerator that has to be looked at, otherwise it'll eat people. There's a slide projector that takes you to different realities. And the whole thing is the SCP, or the FBC's central branch, is actually an old house called the Oldest House. And it's basically like a hellmouth center of energy, all kinds of things. There's elder gods. There's this thing called the Hiss, which is possessed people. Or there's a crazy puppet show with two ugly model kids with real teeth and stuff. It's fucking crazy. But the gameplay is you achieve powers through fighting these other dimensional creatures, and you have your gun that is your symbol of power, basically, and you have a bunch of employees that do stuff for you. It's an intense game all around. Really fun to play because it's really open on how you play it, but it's linear in how you progress. But the side quests are amazing.
Is this an online game or one you have to buy?
It's a game you buy.
Mm.
And it's beautiful, too. The game itself is the graphics are fantastic.
Oh, cool. Well, that does sound really interesting. Anthony, what's your Dicklike suggestion this month?
So for this month, I'm going to recommend Lorcan Finnegan's Vivarium, which has been out. I think it came out a little while ago. I don't know dates anymore. I just watch movies as they pop up on the TV because that's how I watch movies now.
I know it's on Amazon Prime.
That's how I watched it. Which it stars Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg, who most people are familiar with by now. They are a couple who are kind of looking to buy a home, but they're not sure yet. So they end up going out to this neighborhood with this super creepy real estate agent who jets and leaves them there, and they end up getting stuck in this horribly this suburban neighborhood that doesn't change, and they're forced to raise a child. So the trade-off is if you raise this kid, we'll let you out of the neighborhood.
Really?
And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I think it's a little too long, and I don't care for the ending, but it certainly does a... Go ahead.
Is it like a Stepford Wife kind of neighborhood, or...?
Yeah, it's kind of your run-of-the-mill tract home neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
And they don't see anyone else there.
Right.
Really?
They're the only people in this neighborhood, and you're led to. But as you'll find out later why that is, which is kind of cool. And there's an aspect of it that I wish they had explored more, but they don't. But I think it's better. It's a movie better seen not knowing a whole lot about it. For me, I felt it was kind of Dick-like because it honestly reminded me a lot of certain scenes from Eye in the Sky. A lot of the more alternate reality scenarios. Now that I brought it up, though, if you liked Eye in the Sky, and if you've already liked Vivarium, I highly recommend that people watch Channel Zero Season 2, No End House, which is that idea, but taken to its most extreme. And I don't know if you guys have watched Channel Zero, but for the most part, it's a pretty solid horror show. Every season is a different story. I think it's about 9 or 10 episodes each. They're not all bangers, but the first 2 seasons I think were my favorite.
My
Those are
problem
my
with
2
Channel Zero is that I
recommendations.
usually like the first 2 episods, and then I get tired of the idea, like every season, and I kind of wish they were just movies. But for Vivarium, I think it feels like a 1953 Philip K. Dick short story, like from that era where he was writing like the massive amounts of short stories. It's very weird, and I think it'll be in the mode of movies that people debate whether it's actually a horror movie or not. And it is a horror movie. It's also very weird science fiction, but surrealist. Yeah, I agree, Anthony. It's very good.
So those are my 2 recommendations: Vivarium and Channel Zero No End House.
Okay, and I have 2 books this month, one I'm going to go very short on, which the winner of this year's Philip K. Dick Award, Sarah Pinsker, wrote a novel called Song for a New Day, and it was written and released in 2019, and it won the Nebula Award, and it's about a global pandemic, coincidentally enough, and it's about social distancing and where like the whole world is shut down, and it's about touring musicians who kind of try to keep live music alive through a series of undergrounds. But at the same time, one of the main characters is running a company that does virtual reality concerts and is trying to recruit the last bands that are like trying to keep this underground music alive. Half of the novel takes place with this woman who's recruiting, and the other half is this live musician. And I think more of the novel focuses on the live musician than the virtual reality. And as much as I liked the novel as it was, I think focusing on the virtual reality and how music survives the pandemic, I would have liked more on the other end. However, I did like it. I did think it was a good book, and I do think people should check it out. And it was
needs a classical jug band is what it needs.
Yeah, right. The one that I'm more of a proponent of is this book called The Mirage by Matt Ruff. Matt Ruff is kind of man of the moment right now because he wrote a little novel called Lovecraft Country, which is right now the biggest show on HBO and a big deal. But before he wrote Lovecraft Country, he wrote this little ditty, and it is very Philip K. Dick because it's an alternate history that imagines a giant terrorist attack happening on these 2 towers in Baghdad and on November 9th, 2001, which sets off the global war on terrorism against the Christian fundamentalists who did the terrorist attack against this United Arab States.
Nice.
And so there's lots of really cool shit in here. I really hated the ending. I still gave the book, I believe, 4 or 5
2 recommendations that you don't really like. Got it.
No, I really liked this novel.
Welcome to David's subpar recommendations segment of the podcast.
No,
where he had to reach to find a book to have to talk about.
No. I really did like the novel. There's lots of really cool things. There's bonkers aspects, weird shit like that. I did really like a lot of aspects of this book. The main character is a hard-boiled cop from the Baghdad PD. And, so parts of it takes place in the United Arab States and parts of it take place in, the broken up, fractured, fundamentalist Christian United States. And it's a really...
Does he talk about how we got to that state of...
Yes, he does. And there are...
Is it Newt Gingrich's fault, like I always thought it would be?
Not so much, but there is a lot of Dick Cheney and a lot of the
I'm Dick Cheney, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I do think a difference between Man in the High Castle and this is that this novel kind of takes the firm stance that there are two realities and that this is
okay.
a flip side. And so that's very different from Man in the High Castle. My review on my blog talks a lot about the differences between The Mirage and Man in the High Castle and how they're not as comparable as every other fucking review out there did. Because every review compared it to Man in the High Castle, and that annoyed the shit out of me. It is Dick-like, but not exactly Man in the High Castle, as I would say. I think it's, I don't know. But anyways, those are my two Dick-like suggestions, so we can kind of close out this segment.
All right, Anthony, what do we got next time?
World War Terminus has left Earth an underpopulated wasteland where people keep electronic animals as pets. Through this bleak landscape, reluctant bounty hunter Rick Deckard stalks the sophisticated and lethal Nexus 6 androids who have fled their labors in the Martian colonies. In doing so, Deckard soon learns that the new Messiah, the single messenger of hope in a desperate society, might also be fake. Do androids dream of electric sheep?
Bum, bum, bum.
Guys, let me just tell you real quick though. I just want to say, trying to find back cover copy for this was a pain in my ass because everybody just wants to fucking talk about Blade Runner.
The movie.
Everybody's like, "Oh, check out this movie." Blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, I know. I've seen that movie. I love that movie. But the the Blade Runner tie-in novel, not tie-in novel, but the movie edition is like reading the back copy for an action movie. It was January 2021, and Rick Deckard has a license to kill. Somewhere among the hordes of humans out there lurked several rogue androids. Deckard's assignment: find them, and then retire them. Trouble was, the androids all looked and acted exactly like humans, and they didn't want to be found. That's for the movie edition of the book.
Yeah. So that's someone
Jesus
that
Christ.
hasn't even
Okay,
read the book.
Fun fact, though. I've never read this book.
Yeah, and we both guys.
And so this is going to be a whole cool new experience for me.
Yeah.
Because obviously, as everybody knows, and anyone who knows me or follows me on like social media knows, I'm a huge Blade Runner fan. I actually just came into possession of a really cool old school Blade Runner sketchbook.
Really?
Which is super badass.
Yeah, I see pictures of it. It looks really cool.
It's super awesome.
Ganymede Takeover is done. And keep it paranoid.
Get to the Discord. Go on the Discord.
Yeah, I asked a question and then no one answered me. So go to the Discord. Answer my questions.
And
have a discussion.
And David's doing all kinds of new stuff with his blog and recording all kinds of different things so he doesn't go insane during the lockdown. Anthony's working on books and stuff.
That's right. I'm almost done with Now I Can Talk About It because it's no longer a ghostwriting project. I have been collaborating on, well, I don't even know if it's a collaboration, but I've been working on, yeah. So I should have a book out next year with horror author Ryan C. Thomas. So we are now co-writing this as opposed to me ghostwriting it.
Awesome. I'm excited for that. All right.
Yeah, we're all out there.
Yeah.
And I've got so many different channels on the Discord that we can discuss almost anything.
I want to know what short stories people want us to talk about. It doesn't just have to be ones that have been adapted. We don't just have to exist in the realm that Electric Dreams created. We can talk about other stories. I just, there's so fucking many of them out there. I don't have the time to go through every single one. So,
yeah.
Good. All right. That's it. We're done. Good night, America and everybody else.
Keep it paranoid.
Good night.
Go be paranoid.